Welcome to the Earning Freedom Podcast. I am Michael Santos with michaelsantos.com and prisonprofessor.com, and I'm really grateful for this opportunity to share this message with each of you again today. I am continuing with this series. It's a 10-part series in the Earning Freedom Mastermind Program. I designed this program specifically for people who are in prison, people who are in jail, or people who are in schools where they may be separated from other students because of they've been identified as being at risk of coming into the criminal justice system. It's my hope and my passion to try and reach into those institutions and show people that regardless of where you are right now, you can start sowing seeds for a better life. And the way that I'm going to share this message is by revealing more about my own story of going through prison for 26 years as a consequence of bad decisions I started making when I was 20 years old. Those decisions, as I mentioned in the first video, resulted in me being arrested in 1987. I was locked inside of a jail and facing a sentence of life without the possibility of parole. I was not ready to change my life at the initial stages because all I wanted to do was get out of jail. And it wasn't until I was convicted that I was exposed to the first mastermind who would have an enormous influence on my life. And that's why I feel so strongly and so passionately about sharing what I learned from that mastermind with everybody else. Because I can tell you, although I didn't get out of jail one day sooner, I can tell you that it completely empowered me while I was incarcerated. It allowed me to live every day of my life with meaning and with relevance, and allowed me to come back to society strong with my dignity intact. And that's what I want for every individual who is currently incarcerated. I consider anybody who is in prison or who is in struggle or is going through adversity to be a brother of mine. And I consider it my job and duty and responsibility to reach out, share strategies that I learned from masterminds so that other people can grow and we can pass along this message and really build a better community, build a better life, not only for people, but for everybody. That's really what I feel strongly about doing, which is why I do this work on my own time when I'm not working. And so I just wanted to give you that preface. For those of you who missed the first episode, you got a quick brief intro, and I'll start every one of these videos with a brief recap of what we covered in the previous videos. And those of you who saw the first one know that I spoke about the importance of identifying and articulating values. That was the essential first step that I learned from Socrates. If I wanted to transform my life while I was incarcerated, and at that time that I'm starting here, I didn't even know how much time I was going to be in prison. All I knew is that I was convicted. So I was convicted, I got exposed to this story of a mastermind who truly inspired me, and he caused me to start thinking about my avatars, which is what I encourage each of you to do. Think about the people you're going to meet in the future probation officer, the future employer, the future business partner, anybody, and start asking questions of yourself. What can I do when I'm in here to prove worthy of their respect, to prove worthy of another opportunity to live my life successfully? What can I do? And if you begin every day by asking that question, eventually you're going to come up with an answer that you can believe in. You say that if I live this way, people in the future are going to see me as something different from the bad decisions that I made. And that's what I wanted to do. I mean, I made some horrific decisions as a young man, decisions that were so bad that I was facing a sentence of life in prison without the possibility of parole. And I hadn't been sentenced yet. But I was sitting in that jail cell, and I was thinking about those avatars. I was thinking about those people I wanted to meet in the future. And it came across with this plan, this idea. And that plan was three things. One, my avatars would want me to focus on educating myself. If I focused on educating myself, that would be a proof, demonstrative proof that I wanted to live as a good citizen. Second was they would expect me to contribute to society in some kind of meaningful, measurable way. So that was also pretty important. And three, they would want me to build a support network. If I could find other people who would believe in me, it would be easier to expand and persuade more people to come into my life and believe in me. That was the principled strategy that I set, identifying and articulating values. That was the first step, and that's what we covered in the first lesson. And I told you that for me, it was about transparency and authenticity, and that's what I would encourage you as well. In my case, what did I do to build that transparency? Well, quite simple. I picked up a pencil, I sat on the edge of my jail cell rack. I got a piece of unlined paper and wrote a letter to the newspaper. And I told them, I made a lot of bad decisions. I'm going to change my life. Here's what I'm going to do. And it resulted in a front page newspaper article. Well, I'll tell you what. After that newspaper article came out, I had a sentencing hearing. And when I went in that sentencing hearing, the prosecutor, of course, had read it because it was a front page newspaper article. The judge had read it. And the prosecutor decided to address the issue. And I'll never forget what he said. And I may repeat this a couple of times during future videos because it has, even though nearly 30 years have passed since that sentence was made, I will always remember what the prosecutor said. He said, Michael Santos says that he's going to change his life. Well, we believe that if he spends every day of his life working to repay society, contribute to society, every day of his life, and if he lives to be 300 years old, our society will still be at a significant net loss. And the reason that I share that with you is I want you to see that whatever I'm going to reveal to you, and I will reveal everything, I'm 100% transparent, but whatever I reveal to you about my journey through prison and my success upon release, it didn't begin that way. It began with people believing that I should be in prison for 300 years, that I should never get out of prison. But for me, I was inspired by a mastermind like Socrates, and I said, it doesn't matter what they impose on me. I am going to serve this sentence with my dignity intact. I am going to find a way to come back to society strong. And I'm going to use these value principles to get there. I'm going to use my focus on education. I'm going to use my focus on contributing to society. I'm going to use my focus on building a support network. That's going to be the values that define who I am, not the bad decisions I made when I was 20. Now, I couldn't do it immediately. Immediately, the world would look at me cynically, and they would disagree. They would doubt anything that I said. I mean, what would you say if you saw a newspaper article come out and this guy who's convicted of a serious crime says he's going to change his life while he's in prison? You're probably going to be. You're not necessarily going to believe it. So I wasn't complete. My hopes weren't extinguished when the prosecutor said that. What it did is it just grounded me. And it says, okay, I know where I'm going. I'm going into an environment where it's going to seem dark. And you're going to be you may be in an environment like that right now where it seems very dark and the future seems so far away that you can't even see it. So I know what that's like because I was facing a life sentence. My judge didn't impose a life sentence. He sentenced me to 45 years in prison. Now, at the time that I was convicted back in 1987, the law was different from the way that it is today. I'm within the federal system, but the law that existed in 1987 suggested that I could serve a 45-year sentence in 26 years as long as I earned all of my good time. And good time is really a misnomer. I've never liked that term because you don't really have to do anything good to get it. All you have to do is avoid doing something bad. And I suspect that good time works the same way if you're in a prison or a jail where you are. You don't necessarily have to do anything extraordinary. You just have to avoid getting disciplinary infractions. The only thing that it takes to get through a prison sentence is you have to wait for enough calendar pages to turn, and you have to avoid getting into trouble in the prison system. But I got news for you. Succeeding or getting out of prison isn't the same thing as succeeding. It isn't the same thing as coming back to society strong, with opportunities. You got to have a different plan, and that's what masterminds taught me. There were so many people in prison who gave guidance and advice on how to serve time in prison. And it didn't matter where I was, whether I was in a jail, like a Pierce County jail, whether I was in a United States penitentiary, a medium security prison, a low security prison, a minimum security camp, there was always the same message. And that was the best way to serve time is to forget about the world outside and to focus on just building your prison reputation and doing time in here. Now, I suspect that some of you may have heard that advice. It's questionable. It has questionable value. The reason that I say it has questionable value is just look at the statistics. 7 out of every 10 people who serve time in prison or jail come back into the criminal justice system after they've been released. Now, I don't say that to judge people who come back because I think that the system could do a lot better in preparing people for success. If you're watching this video, I think that it's awesome that your administrators gave an opportunity for somebody like me, who was once sentenced to 45 years, to be able to come in and share this message with you. That's my passion. That's my energy. I want to reach in there and I want to show other people that regardless of where you are right now, you can begin building a life. You can begin sowing seeds for a better life, but it doesn't happen by accident. I can tell you what happens by accident. Calendar pages turn, the sentence expires, you come back to society, it's tough finding a job, it's tough getting credit, it's tough getting on your feet, and it's only a matter of time before temptations come and you realize, yeah, that's so tough out here. I'm going to go, I'm going to do something that's going to put me at risk again, and boom, I come back in. That's my job to try and stop that. It's my job to try and show you you can live a life of meaning and relevance and success starting today. But when you come out, you can come back strong if you sow the right seeds. And I can say that with a level of authenticity because I served a considerable amount of time in prison, and I'll talk about that. So my judge sentenced me to 45 years. I don't really know what that means. I'd never been incarcerated before. But one thing I knew was that I was going to come out of this thing. I believed I was going to come out of this thing. And when I came out, my goal, my vision, my plan was that I would be able to walk into any community, any environment, and nobody would guess or assume that I was anything other than a normal person, a normal citizen. Nobody would assume, oh, that guy's been in prison his whole life. That was my vision, to come out of the prison system unscathed and to be able to walk into society and succeed and build a life of meaning and relevance. And I'll tell you something funny. I sometimes go into prisons right now, and guys tell, when I'm giving my presentation, initially they don't know, and I tell them I was in prison for a long time, a lot of guys will say, that fool was never in prison. And they think they're saying it because they're giving me an insult. Maybe I don't look hard enough. But the reality is that was the plan, to come out of prison and have nobody would assume I served a day in prison. And that's what I want for everybody who is watching this video, everybody who is participating in the Earning Freedom Mastermind course. If you follow the principles that I'm showing in this program, if you learn from Socrates and Mandela and Gandhi and the other people who inspired me along the way, you too will come back to society with your dignity intact and with opportunities to thrive. I don't mean to just stay out of jail. I don't mean just get a job and you're out for a couple of months and you're earning $10 an hour. I don't mean that. I mean to thrive. But it all begins with the questions that you are asking yourself right now. Are you looking into the future, and are you saying, who are the avatars that are going to be influential in my life? What are the values by which I am going to live? Once you can articulate them, then you can embark upon the next stage, the next prerequisite. When you go to school, you go to law school, you got to have some prerequisites done. First, you got to have an undergraduate degree. You go to medical school. First, you got to have an undergraduate degree and study pre-med and biology and chemistry and organic chemistry and microbiology and all these different types of schools before you can get into medical school. Well, before you can embark upon this course of the Mastermind Earning Freedom course, before you can really get through that, you too have to do some prerequisites. The first, identify and articulate your values. The second, you have to identify what success means. And we do that by establishing very clearly defined goals. That was my next challenge. After my judge slammed me with a 45-year sentence, I remember going back to my jail cell and starting to think again, okay, this is where I am. I got 45 years. I said I am going to be an individual who educates himself. I said I'm going to be an individual who contributes to society. I said that I'm going to build a support network. But what does all that mean? How do I define success? And in order for me to answer that question, I need to set some very clear goals. And I'm going to tell you how I did that. But first, I've got to give some thanks to my sponsors. And one of the sponsors that I'm going to thank is Greg Reyes. Now, I'll be talking a little bit about Greg Reyes throughout this program because he is also one of the masterminds that inspired me. He was a CEO of a successful company. He took it from startup to being worth about $25 billion. and became a friend of mine and became a sponsor of mine, providing some of the essential resources that I needed at the beginning of this program so that I could sow seeds in helping more people to prepare for success. And I continue to do that. So I just wanted to send this mention of gratitude out to sponsors, and I'll be doing that through every one of these videos and through every one of these lesson plans. I'll be thanking the people who made my journey possible and made it possible for me to be able to create these products and services that I offer in prisons and jails and schools, because without them I couldn't have done it. I mean, I did a lot of time in prison. So in any event, let's continue with the story and the program. So I just wanted to say a message of gratitude to my sponsor. Nothing that you can do for Greg Reyes. You can't buy any products from him. He's just a sponsor of mine, and I wanted to express my gratitude for what he's done to help me. So there we go. I've got my values. I've got this plan that I'm going to build my life. And I'll tell you what happens. I start thinking about my avatars again, just like I want you to start thinking about your avatars. What are the values that are going to define your life? How are you going to define success within each of those values? Well, it's really quite simple. It didn't matter what I believed was an education. That was my first value. I had to think about, what did my avatars think? And the more questions I asked about that, the more I realized my avatars are going to expect me to have a university degree. That is the way they define success. People in society define success with regard to education is having a university degree. Very clear. Now I've got a goal. I've got to earn a university degree. And if I earn a university degree, then I wouldn't have to say I made a commitment to education. It would be self-evident. That's the type of goal I want you to set. A goal that clearly shows your commitment to values. That's a prerequisite. Number 2, what did it mean to contribute to society? I knew that was going to be a challenge for me because I was living in prison. And I didn't know how I could contribute to society in some type of way that people in society would accept. That was what I was after. I was after, in order to really move the needle in my life and build a better life, I had to be thinking about the individuals that would determine success for me. And those were my avatars. What would my probation officer eventually, the probation officer who eventually is going to supervise me, what would he say truly did contribute to society? What would my future employer say? What would a future creditor or a sponsor like Greg, what would he think if I were to say I contributed to society? Is it going to say enough? Well, I didn't get any disciplinary infractions in prison. Is it going to be enough to say, I kept my cell clean. I buffed my floor. Would he care that I say, hey, I was able to control the TV room? I was a shot caller. And none of that was going to matter. None of that. And so because I knew none of that would matter, I had to think about my avatars. What will matter to them? And I'll tell you what mattered to them. Contribution? It's tough because I was in prison, but I thought, if I can publish, if I can learn to write well enough that I can put something on a piece of paper, send it out, get it published somewhere, then I'm going to be contributing to society. Why? Because maybe hundreds or thousands or tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of people will read what I wrote. Well, now it's self-evident. I've got something. I was in prison, but I was contributing something of value to society. And that's what I wanted. I didn't know what I was going to write about. I didn't know what I would publish. I didn't even know how to publish. All I was doing was trying to define the goals. Define the goals that would define success in my life. Either I hit it or I didn't. If I hit it, I succeeded. If I didn't, I failed. And failure is not a bad thing as long as it's a lesson. And you pick yourself up and you go on. There's a lesson from masterminds that say, fail frequently, but fail fast, and then start over. Don't sit there and dwell and continue on a plan that leads to failure after failure after failure. Learn from your failures and move on. So one thing that I didn't want to do is I didn't want to fail, but I had to define what it would mean to contribute to society. And in my case, I defined it as publishing. So I didn't know how I was going to do it. But once I knew what I was after, that helped me. And I'll tell you why a little bit in this lesson and, of course, in future lessons. But the third goal I had to figure out was I got to build a support network. I didn't mean a support network of my mom and her sister and my grandmother and my aunt and my roommate's sister. That's not what I meant. I needed a support network of people that I didn't even know who they were. And they didn't know who I was. And I didn't have any connection to those people, and those people didn't have any connection to me. But some kind of way, I believed that I needed to find 10 people that I didn't know and that didn't know me, and I needed to persuade those 10 people to believe in me. If I could find those 10 people, if I could persuade them to believe in me, wouldn't opportunities open? Wouldn't each of those 10 people maybe be able to introduce me to 10 more people? Without a doubt. And so that became my goal. That became how I would define success. And of course, they worked kind of in harmony. You see, if I worked to educate myself first, well, then it would be easier for me to develop the skill set. Wouldn't be maybe easier, but it would certainly be more methodical approach to develop the skill set that would allow me to become a published author. And if I became a published author, more people would read about me. And if more people read about me, it would be easier, or at least there would be a methodical plan to building my support network of finding people that didn't believe me and persuading them to believe in me. You see, this is what I mean when I talk about taking a deliberate course of action. That's what I learned from masterminds. That's what Socrates taught me, or at least set me on a journey from the very beginning. He questioned the laws that resulted in his being sentenced to death. But instead of crying about it, or complaining about it, or holding himself to be a victim of an unjust law, he took a deliberate, principled stance. And he went through with it, because he said he'd rather die with his dignity intact as a man of principle and character than run away like a coward. And through this whole course of studying more about Socrates, I learned his method of thinking, his method of asking questions, and letting those questions lead to more questions. And this question-based knowledge is really something of all masterminds. You see, you can see it in the work of Mandela, who was incarcerated for even longer than I was incarcerated. I ended up serving 26 years in federal prison. I was arrested in August of 1987. I concluded my obligation to the Bureau of Prisons in August of 2013. So it was a total of 9,500 days in confinement. I spent the last year in a halfway house. I will reveal all of that as these video lessons continue. But I wanted to give you this backdrop of how I learned to grow and maintain a high level of energy, discipline, and passion, even as those weeks turned into months, even as those months turned into years, as those years turned into decades. That's what you've got to do. You got to find the way to develop that strength, that inner strength that's going to carry you through the struggles and the challenges that are ahead. And once you tap into that strength, you need to use it. You need to use it in such a way that it will open more opportunities for you to succeed, for you to create opportunities that do not exist right now. You've got to create them. And you got to recognize that this is a step-by-step process, and we'll be talking a little bit more about that as the process goes. And I told you I've learned these things from Socrates and Mandela and Gandhi and so many other masterminds that we'll be talking a little bit about. Mandela, what did I learn from him? I can tell you. I did 26 years in prison. When I started on that prison journey, Mandela was just getting out after serving 27 years. And when he got out, he didn't serve time like I did for just pursuing this reckless path of trying to lead a fast life. Mandela served this time because the laws were unjust in his country, in South Africa. And he served this sentence as an unjust sentence, but when he walked out of prison, there was no bitterness, there was no anger, there was no animosity. All there was a burning fire to contribute, to build a better world. And that I consider to be extraordinarily successful. That was a mastermind. And as I said, that's what I want to do. I want to serve this sentence in such a deliberate manner that when I emerge, when I come to the other side of this journey, the world will accept me instead of judge me as being an ex-con, as being a guy who served his entire life in prison. And by the time we get to the 10th video of this, you will hear how the world has accepted me. And that's why I feel so passionately about coming back into prisons, going into jails, and letting people know you've got the keys within you to unlock these chains of a confined mentality. I can tell you that since I've been back in society, I've met numerous people who live in like a mental prison that is far more restricting than anything I ever experienced. It's because I was inspired by masterminds. They taught me how to transform and grow and live a life of passion and energy and discipline, even while I was locked in prison. And I just want you to know that it's not only philosophical masterminds, it's business leaders. Greg Reyes was a business leader. He was a guy who told me, became the CEO of this company startup, and why he inspired me is he told me that when he was a high school student, he set a goal. He said, I'm going to be the CEO of a publicly traded technology company. And every decision he made, every decision, was predicated on, is this advancing me to my goal of becoming the CEO of a publicly traded technology company? It determined what he studied in college. It determined whether he went out at night and partied in college or whether he focused on developing his career. It focused on the type of career that he built. It really influenced the people that he associated with. It influenced every choice that he made. And as he described for me, and I wrote a book about his journey, that's why I know him, the more I learned that this path of masterminds is universal. It applies to every individual who achieves a high level of success in every segment, whether it is politics. An individual thinks, okay, what do I have to do to distinguish myself, to get votes, to build a constituency, to achieve a level of influence so that I can get a sufficient number of people to vote for me and I can get into office? What does it take for a business leader? Well, he's got to raise capital. He's got to make a commitment of persuading investors to believe in him. He has got to create a product that solves a customer's pain point. He has got to execute a plan that will bring it to market. He's got to invite the world to hold him accountable. What about an athlete? He knows how much he's got to train. He knows how many, if it's Michael Jordan, how many baskets he's got to shoot, how high he's got to jump, how hard he has to work. If it is an athlete, what else could I say? Any leader, anybody who achieves a high level of success, that individual follows this plan of masterminds. They establish the values that are going to define them. They set clear goals. Not everybody wants to be president of the United States or the CEO of a publicly traded company. Some people just want to be a good father. Some people just want to be in good physical fitness. Some people just want to be, a good citizen. It still begins to the extent that that individual identifies his values, sets clear goals, then he's got the prerequisites to follow the life of significance and relevance and meaning, to build it. That's what we will discuss in the future videos of this Earning Freedom Mastermind course. And I hope that you'll stay with me. And I hope that I will earn a level of your trust by the amount of content that I produce, not only through the book, the Earning Freedom Mastermind course, not only through the videos, but also through the podcasts and also through everything else I share. And I make one pledge to you. If there's anything that I say that you disagree with, anything that I say that prompts a question, please find a way to get that question to me. I'm really easy to find. If your supervisor in the prison can email me, I'm michael@michaelsantos.com. If your family can email me, I will do my best to write about it and speak about it and blast it out on YouTube, on iTunes, and send it to your institution, because I am absolutely committed to providing you with as much content as I possibly can. I don't only share my story, I interview other individuals who were formerly incarcerated and transitioned into society successfully, and you'll be hearing those messages through these podcasts. But first, I just wanted to give you guys that background. I will be back with another video that takes us on to the next stage of the mastermind journey. For those of you who may be listening or viewing this video on iTunes or outside in the society, I will ask you to help support the program, not by writing a check, not by giving money, but rather just go to the iTunes store, subscribe to the Earning Freedom podcast, rate and review the show, because that is how I get more distribution through Apple and how I can get into more prisons and jails and schools and influence more people to begin sowing seeds for a better future. That is how I can live the role of one of my masterminds, Gandhi, who suggested that we should all work and strive to be the change we want to see in the world. Thank you very much. I am Michael Santos with michaelsantos.com and prisonprofessor.com, and I look forward to coming back with another episode. Thanks.